cold, it's dark. Norwich City have taken a point. It is the most wonderful time of the year. Welcome to Preston, everybody, where Norwich City have taken a point here against the Championship's third place team heading into this round of fixtures. I think if that was on offer, as we'd all driven into Deepdale or sat down on our sofas ahead of watching this game, or however you consumed it, I think most of those with yellow and green persuasion would have taken it. And actually, I think in the days ahead, when the emotion comes out of it and when we maybe look on it a little bit more objectively, we will all feel that that is a very good point. But it is hard to stand here so close after the full-time whistle and feel anything but absolutely gutted for Norwich City. The work ethic and the energy that they put into that on a really bad pitch. I mean, I've walked around the pitch and it's cutting up. That squeaking you can hear, maybe else here in the background, is work ongoing on it. It's rained heavy here all week, and you can see that in the middle of the pitch where it was bobbly. It was really hard to gain any sort of initiative on, and it was a game really that had to become an arm wrestle. As I think typically they do against Preston here, you don't tend to get many fantastic footballing games, and that's not a criticism of the way that they play. So to leave with a point on purely looking at the league table, I think it's difficult to argue that it's a good point, and it's one that Norwich City will be very pleased with in their back pocket as they make the very long journey home for Christmas back to Norfolk. But the context around it, makes it feel absolutely gutting. The nature of taking the lead on the 85th minute after showing so much industry, probably more than quality, to work themselves in front. And that moment of quality did come from Jovan Makama, and we'll reflect on that in a moment. To then concede in the way that they conceded, I think Philippe Clement, if he had any hair, would be tearing it out. The nature that they conceded that goal, and it was so disappointing given that close to it. I mean, the goal went in, Norwich kicked off, the ball went up the pitch, and then the whistle blew. They were seconds away from what would have been an absolutely mammoth win, a win that prior to the 3 o'clock games would have taken them out, or did take them outside of the bottom three on goal difference. Now, sadly, they are back in. It is a point. I still think 4 points from Southampton and from Preston is a pretty good return. It keeps them plodding along. They need to keep chipping away in terms of the points to get themselves out of the situation that they are in. And the fact that they were serenaded by the 900 or so Norwich City fans that filled that away end, I think tells you what they made of that performance. Let's get into the game itself. The Norwich were unchanged. There was one change on the bench. Aaron Mundell-Smith out, and it was Jack Stacey back in. Otherwise, it was continuity. It was as you were from a Norwich City perspective. And I thought the opening 15 minutes of the game was probably as passive as we've seen them under Philippe Clement. Preston came out of the traps. They played with intensity. They really put Norwich under the cosh. They go man for man. It can be difficult to kind of break out of those structures. And you have to remember as well, it's an incredibly young team, the team that Norwich fielded here today, but also last week. But I guess in virtue of it being a week older this week, it's the second youngest 11 last weekend against Southampton in the Championship this season. So the third now, basically, by virtue of it being a week later. So to have all of those players thrown into a proper Championship battle like this, and Preston are a team, and again, I say this with as a compliment, they do the basics incredibly effectively. They get the ball from back to front very quickly. They try and work the ball into wide areas. They put you under constant pressure. They fight, they battle. There's real intensity to their game. And I just felt in the opening 15 minutes, Norwich probably didn't have the intensity that we saw last week against Southampton, where they figured out the game a little bit earlier and were as effective with their press. Didn't really see that this afternoon. That doesn't mean they lacked energy or fight, I don't think. But certainly in that 15 minutes, they became passive. And then they began to, I feel like, understand the occasion a little bit more, understand what it was about in terms of contesting those duels. It was a really turgid game of football, in my view. I didn't think there was a lot of quality in the game. It wasn't one of these games where I'm going to be stood here reeling off opportunity after opportunity, because Jovan Makama's goal was Norwich City's first shot on target of the afternoon. Preston had a couple of sighters. Thierry Small in the first half had one that stung the hands of Vladan Kovacevic. There was a Michael Smith header in the second half, which was probably the best opportunity of the game. And I wouldn't say in terms of expected goals that's going to rank particularly highly as an opportunity either that Vladan Kovacevic claimed. There was a hairy moment as well in the first half where Kovacevic dropped a cross and that was put into the net, and the referee, as they tend to do in kind of those moments, gave a foul in Norwich's favour. But it was bitty, it was full of stoppages. I kind of half tweeted my tongue firmly in my cheek at half time that a football match almost broke out in that first half. The second half, I felt there was a bit more flow to it. Probably wasn't a particularly high bar, but Preston, again, similar game plan. Tried to get the ball back to front quickly, tried to put Norwich under pressure, and really they're really organised and so well structured. They don't really concede a lot of opportunities or moments in the game, and Norwich were forced to work incredibly hard for the opportunities that they did construct and did create, and that obviously resulted in the goal, which is a really good bit of play from Emi Marcondes, actually, just to kind of punch the ball through to Jovan Makama. And all game I was a little bit critical, kind of in my seat, of his hold-up play, and the ball kind of bounced off him. I didn't think he used his body well enough, and he was a little bit on the periphery. But the way he held that defender off, the strength that he showed, the determination that he showed, and it's an excellent, like a devastating finish past what is a really good goalkeeper in Daniel Iverson, to get that power and pace and to beat him with that. It's an unbelievable strike. But for me, it's the strength that he exhibited, and it's also that touch, the way he pushes the ball to work a yard of space to create that opportunity and just take the ball away from the defender. It would have been so easy to get underneath the ball, to be off balance, to maybe not get quite as good a connection, but to hold the defender, to turn, to get the first touch exquisitely executed, and then to get the finish excellent. Just really, 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 really clever centre forward play. Ripped his shirt off in celebration. It felt like a really big moment, probably not just in the context of this game and for Norwich City's situation, but probably their season, because if they'd have got that over the line, the psychological boost of being out of the bottom three, even if it would have been temporary, but the fact they kind of would have got back-to-back wins, all of that stuff would have been absolutely huge. And then you absolutely, yeah, I mean, I've got my tripod on a table at the moment. I could hit my head against it, the way they conceded. They kind of went into or tried to go into game management mode. They kept the ball in the corner. I think it was with Pella Matson. And they had kind of Preston where they wanted. The ball in the corner, the clock dwindling down. And I think it was 95-15, actually, when they lost possession of the ball. And I was a little bit dumbfounded, really, the amount of bodies and yellow shirts that were streaming forward to try and join an attack when they were 1-0 up. And actually, the aim of the game, they had the ball where they wanted, they had Preston where they wanted, and it was just probably about surviving that phase, winning a throw or a corner, and seeing the game out, much as they did so superbly against Southampton last weekend. Sadly, they didn't do that. They committed men forward. Matson gets pinched in the corner. There's a little bit of a debate over whether the ball went out of play or not. I personally didn't feel like it did in real time. And Preston break, and when they break from that opportunity, Norwich have committed so many men forward. And again, in the 95th minute of 6 added on, the ball comes to Frokja on the right-hand side. He plays the ball in the middle of the pitch, only for, I counted probably, I think, 3 Preston players in the middle of the pitch, and then they had 2 on the left side that were over. They worked the ball out to the left. The cross comes in. Smith makes the first contact, but he just stands the ball up to the back post, deliberately or unintentionally, I'm not quite sure. And then Wilkie nods it down into the ground, and Kovacevic is a little bit flat-footed. It's kind of down into the ground and bounces agonisingly into the bottom corner. And it's such a frustrating goal to concede. It reminded me a little bit, actually, of March, if you go back there, where Norwich City had scored a late goal. So very similar. I think it was a little bit later, actually, for Antti Sienats. And then, again, very similarly, just didn't manage the game well enough. And I think it was Nunez, dare I mention his name, and Sainz that day that kind of went off on mazy dribbles and were trying flicks and all sorts to try and get a second goal. And then Blackburn went up the other end, and it was Andy Weimann with a header that delivered a sucker punch that day. And that moment, really, I think, was one that probably Johannes Torup will reflect on as being a sliding doors moment, because Norwich were very close to the top 6 if they'd have seen that game out. And instead, they ultimately drew it. They went on a terrible run of form thereafter, and obviously it cost him his job in the end. That's not to say that will happen here, but I think you look at today, you look at Oxford, and you just fear and hope that they don't become really significant moments in the final chapter of this story this season. And we're not looking back in April, May, when it's going to be significantly warmer than this, thank goodness, and looking back at those games and those points that they would have on offer, those 4 points that really they should have in maybe their back pocket, as being really significant. That's my fear. That's my hope, that we don't reflect on that, because actually, in isolation, as I said from the start, I think a point was probably a fair reflection of the way this game or the way this game went. It's a testament to Norwich, the fact that they played this game against a team, irrespective of what you think of Preston and the Championship more generally. They started the day 3rd in the table. They've only lost 2 games here. They've beaten Ipswich here. They've beaten Leicester here. They've beaten some really good teams at Deepdale. You can see why. They're organised. They're committed. They're disciplined. So the fact that Norwich have come here and left with a point, I think, is a good. If we're going to do purely kind of scoreline analysis, I think it's a good one. and it's not a team. It's not a point I think you would necessarily typically associate with a team that is in the bottom three. So again, I think in terms of a results perspective, it is a step forward, but it's the nature of how it came about. And again, the contrast because of the maturity. I did it in my Six Things piece in the week. It was 90 minutes and about 27 seconds. I think that Southampton had their final touch in Norwich's half. 7 minutes added on. They didn't have a single touch in Norwich's half thereafter. Norwich managed that game so superbly, so well, with real confidence and commitment. And today was kind of the reverse of that, where just too many players, I think, got overzealous, overexcited, trying to support a phase of play that didn't really need support. Norwich had the ball and the man, to repeat myself, exactly where they wanted them. Could they keep the ball in the corner better? Yes. Could the header have been prevented? Yes. Could Vladan Kovacevic maybe have potentially saved a goal? Yes. But there's so much that goes wrong before that, and actually the stuff that went wrong was when Norwich had the ball, and they've paid the ultimate price for that in terms of 2 points and a hugely psychological boost in terms of walking away from Deepdale with a point, with 3 points, sorry, instead of one. So that's the frustration. But again, I didn't think it was a brilliant game of football. I thought it was bitty. I thought it was physical. So many stoppages in it. Two teams that probably cancelled themselves out. Albeit, I think Preston probably edged it in the phases that mattered in terms of, control and the type of game that they wanted. And it just became a bit of an arm wrestle. As I said, it's hard to, if you watch this game on TV or you were at the ground, I think you can maybe know where I'm coming from. But it's hard to, I mean, I'm looking across the pitch now, and it's full of brown patches. You can see where the turf's been kicked up. It's kind of swampy almost. And there was one moment in the second half where Maatsen was played a fairly square 5-yard pass, and it bobbled over his foot, thankfully, to Ben Krasene behind him. So that tells you that what Norwich came here to do today, which again you have to think it's similar to Southampton. It was a free at the back. The space was in the middle of the pitch. But I just think the conditions probably didn't allow them to implement what they wanted to do. We saw some moments where they tried to play out from the back, and again they had to abandon that a little bit as well because of the surface. And I think the blood and thunder nature of Preston, and again credit to them, because it can look simplistic, but it's incredibly effective, and that's why Paul Heckingbottom has done such an excellent job here in terms of the organisation. They don't give you a lot of chances. Norwich didn't have a flurry of opportunities. As I said, their goal was the only shot on target here this afternoon. So to keep themselves in the game and to be robust and to not go under, I think not to always contrast it back to where things were, but I think Norwich may well have folded, may well have gone passive a lot earlier. They didn't do that without, as I say, maybe reaching the levels of the performances that we've seen in recent weeks. I felt this was probably Norwich's poorest performance, albeit hugely far away from that Birmingham display, but probably one of their poorest since Clement took over in terms of the attacking output and just the control they had on the game. They probably didn't have enough of that. But to then, if you can't do that and you can't win, don't lose it. They didn't do that. Those intangible elements that have come on leaps and bounds in terms of the duels, the willingness to fight, the kind of willingness to roll your sleeves up and match a team physically, and particularly a team who are specialists in that in Preston. And again, I say that with as a compliment. I think shows probably the level of growth, and to come here, as I said, to reiterate and get a point, I don't think is too bad from where Norwich City find themselves at all. A couple of individuals I wanted to mention. Tony Springett came on the bench, came off the bench, sorry, for a man called Forson. I haven't heard any kind of suggestion on how bad or otherwise that injury may be for him. It didn't look great in real time, kind of mazed across the pitch and went down. Would be gutting for him, really, another injury at this stage. But Tony Springett came on and spoke to him post game. Actually, it's a fascinating story. He's been out for 18 months. He's had spinal surgery. He's been in a really low place mentally, kind of admitted to myself and Radio Norfolk's Chris Gorham. So for him to come back and irrespective, I think, of what you think of whether he's up to the level, I think today he's shown an incredible amount of industry, and I think it's incredibly telling that Philippe Clement is willing to place his trust in him because of the way that he runs and protects his defender. It wasn't, for me, a game and an opportunity where Mate Jurasek could have come in, because I think you risk Fisher getting exposed on that right side, how they worked in tandem in terms of positionally, but just more so the industrial nature of him, the way he runs, the commitment. I thought he was really good second half. A couple of moments where he took on his man, he beat him. There was one moment where he got to the byline and probably just needed to lift the cross rather than drill it, but opted to drill it and forced Iverson into a clearance. There was intent there today, and for him to get an opportunity when, as he said, he felt like maybe it had gone, I think is incredibly positive. It's good to see him kind of grabbing that. So it's up to him now to just try and keep in the group. Obviously, players returning, it's going to become more difficult, but that's his challenge. Can he stay in the group for those Christmas fixtures? Can he make sure that he takes his opportunities? And who knows, maybe if that ankle forcing injury is as bad as it looked in real time, then hopefully we'll see a bit more of Tony Springett, because it's a really nice story. And he said to us there, he cares a huge amount about the club. He's an academy player. And it's easy to forget, I think, that he made his senior debut before Jonathan Rowe as well in the Premier League. So, pleased for him this afternoon as well. And I thought just generally the organisation, the way Norwich defended, albeit despite that final moment in the game, was more positive, was more organised, was better structured. And as I said, they are fully worthy of coming away here with a point. And from where they were weeks ago, that's a step forward. And they just need to keep chipping away and to keep trying to take a step forward in terms of their performance with probably a degree more consistency. So there we go, from Deepdale. Not the greatest game in the world. I'm not going to stand here and pretend that it was a thrilling championship one. Pretty forgettable, all told. One that Norwich City was so close to taking 3 points from, but ultimately they leave with one. Not a disaster, but given how close they were, a little bit frustrating, a little bit gutting, and I'm sure we will feel all of that on the miles home. 250 of them on the way back, and I'm sure those Norwich fans will as well. Thank you very much for watching. Not going to quite go into the New Year stuff. We'll do that, but just wanted to wish everyone who watches these videos regularly. It really does mean a lot to me that you. I find it a little bit baffling that I stand here and I ramble on and people consume that. So thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it. It makes standing here in the freezing cold in Preston on the last Saturday before Christmas worthwhile. Wouldn't be anywhere else for the world. So a Merry Christmas to all of you and to your families. Wish you all good health, and I hope that you get everything, even though it wasn't quite 3 points today, everything else from here that you want. We'll be back at Carrow Road for that game against Charlton on Boxing Day. Pinken.com, the place to go. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching from beautiful Preston. There is the pitch in all its glory. That I know it's Bill Shankly. It looks a little bit like Philippe Clement, but it's fine. We're going to hit the road. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas all. See you soon.